All right, good morning to everyone and welcome to this session on financing self-sustaining community connectivity solutions. My name is Luca Belli, I'm professor at FGV Law School in Rio de Janeiro, and I also chair the Dynamic Coalition on Community Connectivity that has proposed this meeting together with my colleague and friend Dr. Senka Hajic, that unfortunately is not here today with us. And this year also we have had the exceptional help of Dr. Carlos Rey Moreno, that has been the driving force behind this outstanding output that we had this year, not only because of the content, but because we managed to have hard copies printed and delivered 3 hours before I boarded the plane. So they are, let's say that also today we have a further incentive for participants to join us at the table here, because there are copies here on the right and on the left. Also a further benefit if you join us at the table is that the mic is open, so you don't have to queue to make questions and make statements. Having said that, let me start by introducing our distinguished panelists today. We have from my right Chris Locke, Executive Vice President and Managing Director of the Internet Society Foundation. Then we have here our already introduced and today playing the role of the remote moderator, Carlos Rey Moreno from the APC, Association for Progressive Communication, that has also been really instrumental in organizing this work this year and has been with us over the past 10 years of Dynamic Coalition. We have Alessandra Lustrati here, who is Head of Digital Development at the UK Government Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO. Then on my left, we have Marie-Lisa Decanet, founding president of the Institute for Social Entrepreneurship in Asia. And here on site, last but not least, of course, we have Claude Dorion, who is director of MCI Conseil. Now we should have also online already our two remote participants, so remote speakers, sorry. Natalia Fodic, who I see her here. Good morning, bom dia, Natalia. Director of International Programs at Connect Humanity. And then we will have Carl Elmstrom, who is Policy and Program Manager on Digital Development at SIDA, also has been, another organization has been instrumental to the organization of this work. Now, before we start, let me just provide a couple of minutes of introductory remark to set the scene. First, for the participants here to understand what we have been doing over the past decade and why we are here today, and second, to understand the theme of today. The coalition has realized a very long series of reports and policy suggestions that is available on comconnectivity.org. Everything is already available, including the PDF freely downloadable of this book. You can also try to search and find it on the IGF website, but it is a very tough and frustrating experience, so that is why we have a dedicated website, but it is also on the page of the coalition under the reports. Now, we have been discussing community networks, pretty much all issues that can be analyzed on community networks over the past years. And actually, this has been useful because it has also allowed us to have retrospective over the past 10 years, over the past decade, on what could be done to improve the architectures, the governance, the funding, indeed, which is a very important point and is the main subject of today's debate and of this book. So this volume of today and also the presentations of today try to contextualize which type of community networks exist. Then what are the regulatory problems that do not facilitate the funding of community networks? And then what could be the solutions? Starting from empirical evidence, and that is something I want to stress. The report here is not a collection of opinions, it's a collection of facts, it's a collection of very thoroughly researched papers that are backed with evidence and analyze what could be the possible models spanning from blended finance to other community solutions to support the community network initiatives, until what could be the social return on investment of these initiatives. And that is something extremely novel in terms of research and extremely valuable also for investors, not only for people that want to build one. And then we conclude with some recommendations that could be used by policymakers, by funders, and by other organizations. Now, let me stop speaking, which is the hardest part for an academic, and let me give immediately the floor to our introductory remark that will be performed by Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us here, and it's great to be on such a fantastic panel. I would also like to make another pitch for the book. It is a great book, but also it has a fantastic foreword by my boss, so I'm contractually obliged to promote the book, but it is an astonishing piece of work. We at the Internet Society have been involved in community-centered connectivity programs for a very long time. For a significant chunk of our 30-year history. We've been driving this from a practical angle. We run training programs to support communities to learn the very basic skills of crimping wires and building and designing and deploying computer networks, all the way through to the policy angle, where we've been instrumental in helping the ITU, African Union, and other regulators to look at regulation to support community networks and to make them available from a perspective of spectrum. So it's something that's very much a core part of the work that we do. When it comes to financing, what we see, and we are a grant-focused organization, so we're very much, and I've been in meetings with pretty much everyone on this panel, if not today, then in the last few months, explaining the position that we play as a donor and as someone that can support community-centered connectivity at those early stages. What we do is take someone from effectively 0 to a few thousand users. What we can do is put that grant capital and training and capacity building in the first place to help these new networks get off the ground. And what that allows us to do is also then start to train those community networks in what sustainability looks like. Train them in exactly how they can move from being a grant-backed organization to one that has some longevity and some sustainability. And this is a very difficult jump to make. I was saying in a meeting earlier on that in a previous role, talking to someone supporting social entrepreneurs in Kenya, he referred to the fact that often we create grant-entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs. We create organizations that are very good at moving from grant to grant. And as donors and as organizations, I think we train people to be good at getting grants from donors. It's a very different skill to then transition into being a commercial business and being a sustainable business. So when we look at how we can drive self-sustaining community connectivity, we have to understand how we put financing in place that can pick up after the grant stage, that can move through blended finance solutions into the genuine economic sustainability of community networks. But we also have to make sure that we are very good at training people to be able to build organizations that can cross that divide and build into that space. We're committing to this over the next 4 years of our 5-year strategy at the Internet Society. We're committing about 30 million in capital as part of our co-fund on community-centered connectivity that we launched at Mobile World Congress. We're very fortunate to have Meta as a partner for that. They've put 6.3 million into that pot with us, and we're talking to other donors to come into this facility as well. And we're doing that because we believe that one of the best ways of making sure we build a very robust first stage of financing is through partnership. Is through working with other donors and through working with a lot of people who are here today to make sure that there is a coordinated and sustainable way of getting that early grant financing in place. And also so that we can then all use our collective knowledge to see how we do prepare those community connectivity projects for the next stage of their growth and the next stage of their financing process. So we're going to commit to do this over at least the next 4 years, bringing other donor money in place. And what we want to be able to do is see some real success in the projects that we fund and some real success in the sector overall to make sure that we build community networks, whether they end up as cooperatives, whether they end up as social enterprises, that can exist past the grant stage and can grow and develop their capabilities and their businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, for these remarks, and also for stressing the role of the ISOC Foundation that has been also supporting community network initiatives over the past years. It's also very good to know that that is an initial support, and the final goal is to transform them into sustainable, financially sustainable initiatives. Now, let's try to delve into the contributions of our report today. We have the pleasure of having all the co-authored, at least if not all the authors. Lisa, you authored this piece, you co-authored this piece towards measuring the social impact and cost effectiveness of community networks. This is an extremely interesting research, so please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm going to be presenting the results of a research that we've had since last year on the social impact and cost effectiveness of community-centered connectivity initiatives. And to do this, I'll be sharing with you the objectives of the study and the methodology that we used first. In terms of objectives, the study undertook social impact analysis of community-centered connectivity initiatives using two tools. One is development indexing, and the other one is social return on investment. And development indexing assists in the quantification of impacts, social impacts, on major stakeholder groups where simple proxy measures cannot be effectively used. No? So the final stage of development indexing is usually coming up with a scorecard of from 0 to 100, where we assign weights to specific key result areas where there has been significant impact, and we are able to quantify the performance. But in this study, we didn't have enough time to actually do the scorecard, but we were able to establish the significant social impacts of the community-centered connectivity initiatives that we studied. We also use social return on investment, which is a measure of cost effectiveness because it's a ratio of financial and social outcomes to inputs and investments. No? So for a project or a community connectivity initiative to be sustainable or to be cost effective, its SROI, or the social return on investment, needs to be greater than 1. Yeah. So we studied 4 cases, 2 in Asia and 2 in Africa. And the 2 cases in Asia are Kasepuan Ciptagelar Community-Centered Connectivity Initiative in West Java, Indonesia, which served the Sundanese indigenous villages there. And I'd like to just recognize the main actor, the main actor in this initiative, Common Room. I think Gustav, could you stand so that they'll know you? And then the second case was Patardi Community-Centered Connectivity Initiative in Maharashtra, Western India, where 99% of the population are part of the Warli tribe. So these are both indigenous communities. The third case from Africa is Tandanet Community Network. And I'd like to recognize our Tandanet stakeholders here. RISPER is here with us. They operate in an urban slum in Kibera, Nairobi, Kenya. And the fourth case was Zenzeleni Community-Centered Connectivity Initiative, working in Mankosi and Situhele, rural villages in Eastern Cape, South Africa. Now, I think one of the more important findings that we had from this research is that community-centered connectivity initiatives are not just ordinary enterprises, but they are social enterprises, meaning to say they're social mission driven. So as social enterprises, they actually offer 3 types of services. The first type of service is what we call transactional services. These are connectivity services accessed through financial or other form of agreed transaction in exchange for the service. No? So these are services that even commercial ISPs offer. But the 2 other kinds of services are services that are not offered by ordinary ISPs, no? Which are what we call social inclusion services, which are oriented towards addressing digital exclusion and meaningful connectivity or other factors behind the usage gap. They enable connectivity to assist the poor and marginalized to have better access to basic needs, to social and economic services, so that For example, in some of the communities that we studied, the internet services were being provided in a way that was also building the capability of the marginalized stakeholders to use the internet in an effective way to improve their quality of life. The third type of services is what we call transformational services. They're oriented at enabling the poor and excluded to have the capability to become actors in their own development, to enable their capability to own, govern, and manage digital resources, to positively impact on their lives and their communities. No? So these are actually services that are provided to the organizations and leaders who provide the connectivity service in the community so that they'll have the capability to govern, maintain, sustain the delivery of the services. So what we found is that the significant social impacts of community-centered connectivity initiatives have been mainly facilitated not by transactional services, but by social inclusion and transformational services. On the screen, you would see some examples so that it's clearer to you. A transactional service would be, for example, the provision of internet service through vouchers that Kasepuan Chip Taguilar does. Yeah? But social inclusion services would include digital literacy training, online publishing of curricula and training materials for the villagers. It would include podcasts, workshops, or local content development, and the development of a village culture through digital storytelling. So these are some of the services that Kasepuan Chip Taguilar, as a community-centered connectivity initiative, actually provides the village. The transformational services included training and capacity building of technicians and locals to undertake monitoring, maintenance, and repair of internet tools and devices. Also, capacity building and support to set up and manage SIGA Sakula, or the Media Lab, which is actually the lab that creates local content, no? For use by the communities. And then also capacity building for locals to manage and extend internet services to adjacent villages. So it's not just the immediate village, but other villages as well. So what is also very clear in the study is that the 4 cases showed that social inclusion and transformational services facilitated impacts that clearly demonstrate the value proposition for investing in community-centered connectivity initiatives as they relate to at least 6 key result areas. And we proved in the research, of course, we did the 4 cases and they're actually available. We will be making them available online, apart from the integrative report that's available already here in the publication. The first is increased levels and capacities for inclusive human development, the improvement in the economic position and conditions of community stakeholders, more effective preservation of the cultural identity, heritage, and integrity of the community, because 3 of the cases were actually in indigenous communities. Increased levels and capacities for climate action and natural resources management. The empowerment of the community to control, govern, and manage internet and digital resources, as well as the inclusion and empowerment of women as stakeholders in digital transformation. Just to show you more clearly what these key result areas mean, and because of the lack of time, let me just show you what improvement in the economic position and conditions of community stakeholders look like for the cases in Asia. No? For Kasepuan Chip Taguilar Community-Centered Connectivity Initiative, this was expressed in terms of increase in assets, not only in terms of household assets, but the increase in financial resources to support the increase in the consumption or avoidance of overborrowing. A second element of this key result area of improving the economic position and conditions of community stakeholders was increase in business transactions and new business enterprises. There was an increase in the trade or transactions of existing micro-entrepreneurs, as well as an increase in employment generation. A third was a greater sustainability of the agricultural sector that was expressed in terms of improved capability to use new adaptive farming techniques to climate change, integrating traditional practices with new technologies. It was also expressed in terms of greater intergenerational sustainability because the involvement of young farmers was actually facilitated. In India, with the Pathardi Community-Centered Connectivity Initiative, improvement in the economic position and conditions of the community stakeholders was expressed in terms of financial empowerment of the tribal women who started generating their income as the sellers of the vouchers. No? And tribal women also started to open their bank accounts. Second was an expansion of markets online, which was manifested by the increased customer base and improved earnings of those who actually were selling online. So the other finding, I think, that was very significant, with the use of the social return on investment methodology, we were able to show that over a period of 3 to 4 years, that the social return on investment ratio was above 1 for all of the community-centered connectivity initiatives. And if you notice from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4, it is an increasing trend. That means that the cost effectiveness is actually what is being shown, and there's an increase in the social value created over time. So in conclusion, may I just say that the study that we did proved that community-centered connectivity initiatives provide social inclusion services and transformational services that generate significant social impacts beyond what commercial ISPs can offer. Secondly, social inclusion and transformational services facilitated impacts that clearly demonstrated the value proposition for investing in community-centered connectivity initiatives as they relate to the KRAs, the key result areas that I already explained to you earlier, and that the social return on investment ratios being all above 1 and their consistent upward trend every year demonstrates that there is an increase in the social value created by community-centered connectivity initiatives over time, so that CCCIs are actually cost-effective in bridging the digital divide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria-Lisa, for this excellent presentation and also for sticking to the time. Actually, these provide very concrete evidence to what we have been arguing for some years about the positive externalities that community networks generate locally and how they not only decentralize connectivity, but also decentralize to some extent, not only decentralize, but also create new wealth. Yes. Not only in economic terms, but also in other terms that are much more difficult to measure, which is the social impact. Excellent. Now, there is the next presentation will be by Claude Dorion, and he has an excellent chapter with co-authors, including also Carlos, on breaking the financial divide of digital divide, which is a title I really like very much.
Yes, good afternoon to all. I've got a slide presentation that would support a 40-minute presentation. I'm going to try to be as succinct as possible. The operation that we did was to make an analysis, a structural analysis of the financial needs of the community-oriented connectivity initiatives in relationship with the financing opportunities. And we did this through a survey where 85 different initiatives coming from 3 continents participated in our operation. So it allowed us to have some crossover presentation of the different challenges that are encountered by the organization. On the first aspect, you have on this slide some quantitative demonstration of Lisa's presentation, where the connectivity initiative themselves have the evaluation that they do have a clear social impact on their community. They allow people to increase their economic situation. They help to get access to social and health services. And they contribute as well to build a more integrated community where different services are available to all members. So So it's like a macroeconomic demonstration of the single case studies that Lisa just presented. We believe that in some kind of way, the financial divide that we are observing in the access for financial solutions for connectivity initiatives are based in a fractious dialogue between external environment being the regulation, the territory where we have to develop the projects, the characteristic of the community, and the technology that has to be used efficiently to cover the services on one hand. On the other hand, you have the challenges coming from internal functioning and origin of the projects, where we have, in most cases, a challenge of size and low density of the service, which will bring average cost for user a little higher. And we always we encounter the constant hesitation between articulating the equilibrium between the social accessibility of the service and a sustainable pricing policy that will allow to offer the service on a long-term basis. And there's also a question of skills to be supported and enhanced, being on the technical operation of the service and also on its marketing and management aspect. And the other element that represents a challenge for the initiatives is that they have some difficulty to demonstrate exactly their performance as an operator and their social impact as an actor of their community, and that will bring constraints in their dialogue with the financial sector. And with the financial sector, we see some relational gaps coming from the expectations as the return that we should expect from an investment on one side, but also on the documentation of the projects, where we have to get a closer mutual understanding on how do we present a connectivity project to a financial actor, and how the financial actor has to consider all kinds of impact in the way to assess the investment possibility. We also have the difficulty coming from the perception of the higher management cost of doing small financial operation, and the perceived risk coming from the non-profit nature of those operations. We asked our sample of initiatives what were their main constraints in raising their project and developing their project, and you see on this slide that they are multi-factored, but there's a high density of participants that underline clearly that access to financial solution, fundraising, the cost of equipment, all financial related issues are among the main constraints that they are encountering. We also asked them for their different challenges, and you see there again that the cost of the equipment is important, the cost of funding, difficulty to have access to some technical services as well, are all issues that they have to overcome. And among the organizations that we surveyed, we see all kind of different financial situations on the level of covering the total cost coming from the operational revenues coming from the operations. And you see here that there is just a minority of the initiatives surveyed that cover all the cost with their autonomous revenues, and that this part of this rate of covering the cost is quite variable, coming from 0 on up to a few minor minority cases where there is a full coverage of costs coming from the revenues. And this will depend mostly on the social policy and the type of population that are covered by the service. This is not a contemporary art try and failure. It's a graphic demonstration of the very large diversity of solutions that are put forward by the initiatives as how do we split the revenues from private fees paid by the user, community financing, public grant, municipal or local government support, and that not only that there's different recipes, but there's also different mixture of those different sources that are used depending on the countries and the regions where the initiatives are active. And this implies that with different size of operation and different level of autonomous revenues and different solution as blended source of revenues, you will have to encounter different kind of financing in order to accompany those initiatives into keeping operating and developing their revenues. And one of the basic strategy for us is we really have to build on a mixture of financial products where impact will be mostly financed through grants. Equipment and assets will be mostly financed by loans, and the working capital and the risk part of the operation should be at least partially financed by flexible, refundable financial products, and that together those three kind of sources should be involved in each project because they are self-reinforcing. The strategy of sharing a project between debt, equity, and grant allows the grant part to reduces the risk perception by the refundable part of the financing, and by consequence will help to reduce the interest rates that will be expected from the players. And the fact that bringing some debt part in the financing of the projects that are historically mainly depending on grants will allow the system to accompany more projects and to increase the volume of financing that may be available for each project. Right now, as you see in this slide, all the CCIs that we surveyed had more than one type of financing that was involved in their project. The red financing that you see are all refundable, and the blue financing are all non-refundable. And you see that international cooperation, being philanthropy or cooperation development agencies, are the main players that we most frequently see in those cases that we surveyed, but they never are alone in financing a project. So for in my last 40 seconds at least, our main proposal and message is that there is a clear need and pertinence to bring a financial mechanism that will be blended finance in order to increase the volumes that are available for the connectivity initiative that are led and made for communities, and that kind of project should allow to increase the size of the projects, and even if it has to pay a certain part of interest on its financing, it should allow to lower the cost per user with an economies of scale. So that was the main message, with the importance of having a flexible answer that has to be adapted to each and every CCIs that has to be supported. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claude, for highlighting, providing us a very good and detailed mapping, and also starting to put forward what could be the solutions, right? Which is the direction towards we are starting to move, especially with the next presentation by Natalia Fodic and Brian Vo. Sorry, I forgot to mention that we will also have Brian Vo in the picture, so connected with us remotely. He is Chief Investment Officer of Connect Humanity, and they are co-author of this excellent paper on building an impact investing market for community-centered connectivity. Please, Natalia, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here with you remotely. I wish I was there in person. So good to see many of you. And this study was commissioned by APC. So I would like to thank APC and also all the community-centered internet providers we have talked to. I know that some of them are, Lisa mentioned that Gustav is there in person, and also our colleague from Tendanet. I see Saul online that used to be at Zanzeleni. So thank you everyone for providing valuable inputs and helping us developing this study. So it's the first cross-sectional analysis of community-centered internet providers in the Global South through the lens of investability. So 9 initiatives were assessed, and the initiatives were in South America, Africa, and Asia. And as some colleagues have mentioned before, this is more important than ever because, well, first of all, I think I might be mistaken, but I think it's the first time we have a DAY3 discussion at IGF focusing specifically on financing. So while this has been a need for a long time, I'm glad to see that we are finally starting to add that to the agenda here too. And we have seen some major challenges over the past months, right, in regards to financing development. So I'm really glad we are talking about grand entrepreneurs, as Chris has mentioned. And I would like to introduce my colleague, Brian Vo, who is the Chief Investment Officer at Connect Humanity. And he, is really an expert in this field. He has almost 20 years of investment and strategy experience, and he has a portfolio of projects he has been involved in of $7 billion. So he knows what he's talking about, right? So I would he's going to present the study, and we both will be here for questions later.
Thanks, Natalia, and thank you all for having us. I think it's really been a joy to work with APC and also collaborate with Claude and MCE. And I think a lot of the aha moments that we had was really looking at it both from the supply side of the capital, but also the demand side of the capital. And that was the part of the equation that we really focused on. So what did we do? As Natalia mentioned, we analyzed 9 different CCIs across the world. But why did we do that? What we wanted to add to the conversation was beyond some of the top-down evaluations of what does the market need, what do CCIs need. We wanted to look at it from a bottom-up nature to really start with the finish line of, if we looked at these organizations as potential investments as an investor, how might we underwrite it? Would we do an investment as they are right now? If not, what might be some of the gaps that would be preventing us from doing an investment today? And so that really was the goal of it, to say, let us purely look at this from an investment underwriting perspective. What might we be able to learn about the organizations and really the state of readiness? Because I know there's a lot of conversation around like investment readiness and investment ready. And so with that lens, with that mindset, we used our underwriting risk framework that we've used for all of our real investments, actual investments, and that's centered around 5 major things. First is looking at the network technical design. How is the network designed? How is the organization thinking about construction, operation, engaging the community, getting subscribers, maintaining the network, staff build out, et cetera. Second one was around community engagement. How are they thinking about getting that right to play? How are they estimating actual demand? How are they thinking about pricing their products and services? That culminated in the third thing around business model. So these are all the parts of the equation, but how is the team then bringing it together to say, here really is our business plan, our projections, our expected financials, the gaps in the types of capital we might be needing. Fourth, it was then a portfolio impact. So we wanted to mimic it really from an investor perspective, where investors wouldn't just look at an opportunity in isolation, right? I'm going to look at potentially investing in this organization and how that the economics of that particular deal fit into my broader portfolio. Does it weight average my returns up or down? Does it weight average my collective risk up or down? And then the fifth one was around legal and compliance. And those were some of the more standard fare of like, do you have the right licenses, permits, audits, financial audits to date? So that's what we did. Here is a snapshot of the organizations that we were able to engage. So as you can see, we were quite intentional in really trying to get that cross-section from really representation across the Global South. So what is it that we learned? The first one is demand is real. And I don't think that's going to be really news to anybody online or in the room. But it was very, I think, inspiring to see how potent that demand really was, and how the organizations, the CCIs, were able to capture that, communicate that. With many of them, with a few years under operation, having take rates in the 30 to 50% range. So from an investment perspective, really great to see. I think here is also great to see a lot of innovation around the business model, how different CCIs might capture that demand in terms of, some might have subscription types of products where others had vouchers. The second major thing that we learned was the technical capacity is very credible. The level of depth in how the CCIs spoke about the thoughtfulness of designing the network, different types of equipment that they were using, redundancy and resiliency to their network was really impressive. I think there was such a depth in the problem solving and the grasp of the technicalness of really connecting the unconnected. So really that technical expertise we saw really in spades. The third one then is growth is primarily blocked by structural barriers. And what are some of the structural barriers that that we saw. First and foremost is lack of access to capital. One of the primary things we're talking about here. But it seemed to be more on the CapEx side rather than the OpEx side. Most of the organizations we analyzed were financially sustainable in some way, at least on the operating side. And so it really was that CapEx, that upfront infusion that they needed to either build or grow that network. Most of the capital that we've seen in here has been from multilaterals, donors, funders of some sort. And that kind of led to the second major structural barrier, which is, I think, when we saw CCIs grow from primarily grant funding, that altered the way that we were engaging with them on how to talk about how we were talking about their business model and their financials. So oftentimes, those organizations who were founded through grant funding, had more. When I asked for financials, that was where we saw more grant proposal budgets, and that lens of thinking. Rather than financial projections that you might get from a privately owned, privately operated type of company. And then lastly, structural barriers around restrictive regulatory environments. And this was definitely jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but anywhere from spectrum and licensing all the way through to eligibility for different subsidies. So what now? The first one is we saw a huge opportunity to design better capital. Claude mentioned a few, potential financing tools. I think when we look at broadband in particular and CCIs, it is just a different business model. It is a different type of, business and organization that is not just infrastructure, but also not just community or civil society, right? And so the need to create a financing product that makes more sense for this type of business, I think has been a big need. Part of that also is it seems like the ecosystem also needs to step away from just thinking about a single deal perspective and thinking about it as a portfolio perspective. While we looked at 9, some might be on the margins, invest or don't invest, investment ready or not ready. But I would say if the more that we're able to aggregate those underlying CCIs together, you're actually more able to spread the risk, the project risk, the connectivity risk, the financial risk across several CCIs. And that might be a better way to unlock capital at scale and deploy capital at scale. Funding technical assistance. Now, earlier when I mentioned the technical understanding was really strong and deep, there was a variation, a pretty big variance in the understanding of business planning, business modeling, translating from grant-led organization to revenue and earned income-led. So being able to pair that technical assistance with investment, either pre or post investment, we think is also important. Treat this as infrastructure investing and not charity. That was, I think, a critical thing, aha moment for us when we were engaging with some who started as grants and nonprofits, are trying to figure out what their pricing model is. But there's this like jump that I could see folks trying to make, even within their organization and internal dialogues. About how do we evolve the organization really into a sophisticated, financially sustainable operator, not just nonprofit. And then lastly, catalyzing the market. I think we can do this by aggregating a lot of the demand through things like facilities and funds, not just looking at it through deal by deal. I think a second one is really developing bespoke underwriting tools and benchmarks here. If you're copying and pasting an underwriting algorithm from another industry, it's just not going to work for broadband. Connectivity is just, particularly for CCIs, it's the intersection of way too many things to fit into the box of other underwriting. And then lastly, figuring out how to align philanthropy with investment capital. I would say, on that fund or portfolio basis. So those were our biggest learnings. Turn it over back to you.
Thank you, Brian. This is really enlightening. I think, yeah, Natalia, you are right. This is the first time we have an analysis from investors that actually could be a guide for investors that want to chip into this, that invest into these initiatives, or actually also a guide that community network leaders and associations can use to reverse engineer it and know what to pitch to investors, which is also quite useful. And then also, I think I speak on behalf of all the panelists here saying that, Brian, if you need to invest your 7 billion, please contact us and we will give you a lot of tips. Now, to go on with our presentations, and I would like to ask the last presenters to stick to time so that we still have good 10 minutes to discuss. Carl Elstrom from SIDA, thank you very much for being with us online and for having also supported this work. Please, Carl, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. Sorry to not be there in person, especially since I'm in the neighboring country. But I had to stay in Stockholm. So, but very happy to be here. So it's a little bit with a rising sense of worry that I've seen the other presentations, because basically you've covered sort of all my main points. But I'll try to mention some things anyways. I mean, I think this is super timely, considering how many donors are reducing or are getting reduced budgets. We even see, major withdrawals from development in some cases. So timing is great for this. So my experience is mostly from SIDA. I started working with APC, I think, back in 2018. But for the last few years, I've been at the European Commission, seconded from Sweden to the European Commission. And I think, Claude, you had a slide where you had sort of relational challenges or something like that, working with private investors or even DFI investors, and sort of combining that with development cooperation or civil society culture kind of. I think that should not be underestimated. Those challenges. It's basically like we it's different languages, right? There is clearly a need for facilitation or even interpretation. So that's sort of an important point from my perspective. And looking at sort of the more technical sides of the financing, I mean, I was for the last years I've been working on. I was working on setting up a fund. So this fund was more commercially driven, and I mean, let's also remember and not forget the fact that the connectivity market in many places in Africa is going to grow a lot. So there should be room for different types of actors, different types of investments. So the fund that I was working on, or sort of the fund idea and structure, it was similarly to this, sort of based on looking at existing types of investments in connectivity, but really ranging from submarine cables to mobile networks, and even data centers could be included in this work that I did. And there I think Brian also mentioned something important, because you have to have a portfolio perspective for sure to reduce risk, to spread risk. But there is also important to consider, you have to spread it in the right way, because in the end, you'll be sitting there with a group of people and a fund manager who are identifying the projects to invest in. And of course, they can't be experts in all types of digital infrastructures across all continents, because that would require a huge team to do that in an efficient way. So I think striking the right balance and basically allowing more of those community networks that are sort of likelier to have high revenues and somehow grade it in order to be able to finance the one with higher risk, basically. And of course, it makes complete sense. I think, Claude, you put it very clearly in your presentation. I mean, it's really about bringing together a multi-stakeholder group to do the investments. I mean, at the bottom, there should be grant funding, which is for technical assistance, or the setting up costs of whatever financial function you're building, right? And actors like SIDA, we can do guarantees. I mean, the European Commission can also do guarantees to lower the risk for other investors. And of course, these other investors could be, organizations like the World Bank or the European Investment Bank, the national DFIs, which clearly, I mean, they would also be interested in the social return of investment, right? But I think it's important to see them as a different layers, because depending on how commercial or how commercially viable the projects end up being, or how big a portion you have of the more commercially viable projects, you might even have private investors on the top. And of course, in a layered investor structure, it's probably, well, of course, the ones who are giving out the guarantees or the grants at the sort of bottom of the structure, they will always be the most likely to lose the money or to lose their investments in case of failures. And the risk goes lower and lower the higher you get in the structure. And not very fairly, but I guess logical in another way. When there are some return on the investments, the people on the top of this gets repaid first. So that's where you might be able to even attract private investors with or without guarantees. So I hope that might be helpful. I mean, I think that there are similar cases that could be used, or that could sort of guide this a bit. But yeah, basically, sorry, there was one other thing. I think there will also be sort of a relational issue when you try to combine ODA, development assistance funding, the grants, with companies, just as simple as that, because then you'll run into issues of the ODA grants should not be able to generate profits. I mean, revenues, okay, probably fine, but if it goes sort of into the profit area, it becomes much more difficult. So there are quite some challenges around that. But other than that, I think relational challenges, spreading the risk, allowing a bit more of commercial things to come in to sort of carry the less commercial ones. Those would be sort of my highlights. But thanks a lot, and super excited to see all of this work progressing so much. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Carl, particularly for respecting the time, and also for highlighting something that we have strived to emphasize over the past decade, that is that community networks are really fantastic examples of multi-stakeholder partnerships. And we frequently speak about multi-stakeholder dialogues, but we also should analyze more how stakeholders can interact together to build things, right? All right. So the last, but of course not least, word to Alessandra Lustrati from SEDO, that also has been instrumental for the organization of this work. Please, Alessandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Luca, and wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm in even deeper trouble than Carl, because obviously all the great points have been made. So I'll try to maybe add a little bit from the perspective of FCDO, of course, and how fundamental we think that this piece of work is and all this process, but also how it fits within our broader approach to supporting last mile connectivity through community-based solutions, and in particular community networks. I have a shout out to the presence of Common Room and Tuna Panda in the room, because I've been on the roof of Tuna Panda to actually see the TV West Space technology in 2019, I think, and almost broke a leg. And I have seen the bamboo tower in Chip Chipped Aguilar, I never pronounce it properly, with Gustav. So I feel that everything that we are discussing in this room today, that might sound a little bit theoretical. We talk about broad, big concept like SROI and how can we work on the underwriting, etc. It is actually something extremely concrete that has a direct impact on people's lives. And I am extremely proud of the work that has been done by others. I mean, I have almost no merit in all of this, but I'm really glad that we are progressing in this field. Just to zoom out very quickly, the reason why I'm speaking here with you is because from FCDO we've been basically supporting last mile connectivity for many years. We did this in various ways, but at some point we decided that really supporting the community networks was and community-based solution to last mile connectivity was like a foundational block of digital inclusion, which is a key pillar of our digital development strategy 2024-2030. But this is just a new strategy. Of course, we've been doing this for many years, and in particular through the Digital Access Program. We've been having now for over 4 years, I think, the collaboration with and the partnership with the APC. And of course, CEDA have been great supporters of that. So as you can see, multi-stakeholder approach, different type of institutional donors who actually maybe work in different ways but complement each other. Obviously, the social enterprises, the community networks, the experts in finance, obviously great NGOs like APC and ISOC as a fundamental actor in all of this, and of course, the sort of academic and also research expertise. All of this has to come together to progress. We've been working on supporting digital inclusion, in particular last mile connectivity models, always working at two parallel levels. One is the level of policy, regulatory frameworks, standards, and spectrum management. And we are committed as the UK to continue working on that so that we can create a better business environment actually for social enterprises and community networks for last mile connectivity. And the other level is more like actually in the community and in the market, basically testing those technology and business models that make sense at the local level, that have to be very diverse, as Claude was saying, and that can become sustainable if we work obviously on the appropriate forms of access to finance. And this is also a topic that is very close to my heart because I have a background in SME finance in the olden days and digital financial inclusion. So I feel that it's all coming together. Maybe I will just mention, given that we want to have at least a few minutes for the questions, of course, I'll just mention maybe the points that have struck me the most in all the presentation. So the fact that we've managed now to really embed in our narrative the concept of social enterprise and SROI, as Liz explained. The fact that we think now differently about community networks and their investibility, although recognizing that we need a blended finance approach where we can't expect the community networks to suddenly become from one day to the other fully viable for instance, private commercial investors. So the importance of starting from the grant side but blending it directly with different type of finance. It would be interesting to do more in the future to understand the interaction of debt and equity in this. And I know that there are different schools of thought on what would be viable. And we've talked about the underwriting and how to actually analyze, what are the different features of the community networks, even in the different contexts. So seeing that the demand is real, that there is very deep tech capability, and of course the work of APC and others partners in doing like the School of Community Networks, building local leadership, local technical capability, being able to do operation and maintenance of community networks means that you have a really robust sort of entity that you can invest in, but there are the barriers. And I think Brian, if I'm not wrong, explained that really well in terms of both access to finance, but also the business capability of even just at the very basic level, not designing just a budget for a grant, but actually designing a proper budget and a focus for your business and proper accounts. And, so growing the business capability also of community networks. So it's the kind of demand side rather than just the supply side of which type of sources of finance and investment we can think of. The importance of aggregating and using scale to sort of distribute and spread risk, but also reach that critical mass that can reduce also the administrative cost and make everything more attractive for investors. And then maybe I'll just come to the last point, that is, as the UK, we want to continue to be committed to add value where we can, because through the Digital Access Program, what we can do with the type of finance that we have in that program and in our digital development portfolio. And Carl made a really important point there about the use of ODA and how you can commingle it or not with other type of funds. We can continue to support things like technical assistance, capacity building, the broad business environment, and of course reducing some of the costs of maybe the underwriting for the individual investment efforts. That's something that we can do, and maybe we cannot directly obviously invest with the other money, and we also don't have any returnable capital in our portfolio, but we hope that we can continue add value in that sense. I will leave it at that, but I just want to congratulate again everybody involved in the work, and looking forward to the questions. Thank you. Well
Fantastic. Done. Thank you very much, Alessandra. Now it's time to check with Carlos if we have any questions from the audience, but I see that he is running to find a source of energy for his computer. So let me try to reverse the order and start from the room. So if we have any questions or comments from the audience, anything you would like to know, ask to our participants, to our panelists. I also see that, yes, we have a hand raised. I think there is a microphone there, or if you want, you can even have a seat with us and take a complimentary copy of the report and may ask your question. Yes, it's on. Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. My name is James Nguo from Alinet in Kenya, where we are running a community network. I appreciate the research is done on various community networks, and one of the items I would like to highlight is the structure of community networks by the nature of the licenses that they have. They are supposed to be very much integrated in the communities, including ownership, such that when you have to seek funding from investors and they look at your business model, they see a lot of risks, because we are looking more at social return on investment as opposed to, the profits themselves. If you look at like the area where we work, where people find it very difficult to pay $10 in a month, then you need very large numbers to be able to break even. Some of us have had actually to pump personal resources in communities, community networks to have them work. Because when we try to seek funding, we've actually not have had any one donor even give in excess of $15,000. When you look at the network equipment that are required to expand the network to serve a large area, you realize that you need a lot of, amount to be spent on equipment, especially around CAPEX and OPEX. So most of these community networks are relying much more on volunteers and other initiatives, and I think it's a high time that governments and donors look at them as social good and continue to pump money, just like they do in health and education, in order to have many people, enjoy the benefits of digital opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very important statement. Do we have, I think that now Carlos has energy, so we can... we can
sorry about that. There is a question, or there was a question in the chat. I don't see the person who asked it anymore. Maybe he left. But what is the relationship between connectivity availability and energy availability, and perhaps also other humanitarian uses for any available energy? And I don't know if maybe in the context of climate finance and some other things that we are talking about, whether any of the panelists or also the research from Lisa on the KRA around green and environmental impact, whether there is any reflection there that you would like to share and highlight. Thank you.
I see that Chris already has a reply to our $1 billion question, so please, Chris, go ahead.
Just very quickly, from the community networks that we work with, when we talk to them about the extra development and capacity training that they want, power comes up as one of the most common things. And not just from the perspective of wanting to move to greener solutions from power, but also, and we know this was the case, and I visited it recently in Tandernet, where surges in power cause outages. So power management, moving to greener solutions and being able to secure power in a way that allows a network to grow is probably the most requested thing we have as a training topic after the basics of networking and managing it as a business.
From the experience of community networks we've studied, I think because we're working with underserved and far-flung communities, they usually need power in the form of renewable energy because they don't have access to the grid. So I think investments in green energy is very important side by side with investments for community connectivity initiatives. But maybe some of the community networks that are working on this, like Gustav, you might want to come into the discussion about the relationship between energy and demand for energy and also connectivity.
And if you want to do so, you have 1 minute and 8 seconds.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. In terms of energy supply, most of our project sites that we are working with, there are almost none energy or electric supply. So we have to, like in Ciptaglar, we use microhydro power supply, and the community are already running the microhydro power plant for quite some time, and they are very skillful for that. So there are strong connections between green energy supply with community-centered connectivity. Thank you.
Fantastic. As we only have 31 seconds left, I think this is time to wrap up. And I would like to thank everyone. Also, I would also like to remember that on our site, comconnectivity.org, there are also our previous reports, and one of them was also dedicated to exploring some of the issues on sustainability, but from a more environmental perspective. Some years ago, we have done a lot of work. So if you are into this topic, please go there and download as much as you want, because it's free. And I would like to thank very much all the participants and all the speakers, and particularly our friend Carlos, and if she can hear us from online, our friend Senka Azic. And thank you very much for the great discussions. See you next year.